I'm 82 years old, and until 2 summers ago, I thought my hatred was a kind of fidelity to the truth. Stay with me for 60 seconds, because what I'm about to admit will land hardest on the people who recognize themselves in it, especially the men, especially the ones whose fathers were the kind of men nobody dared to disappoint, and whose mothers died too young. My father died when I was 45, heart attack, gone within hours. For almost 40 years, I have described our relationship to people as complicated. That was the polite version. I'm 82. I don't have time for polite anymore. I carried hatred for my father for almost 50 years. I refused to go to his funeral. My sister called me sobbing from a payphone outside the church. I told her she didn't understand. Everyone in my family said I would regret it. I told them they didn't understand either. It took me almost 40 years after his death to understand that the person I had been punishing all those years was me. And what finally cracked it open wasn't therapy, wasn't religion. It was one conversation with a stranger on an airplane. Let me start with a phone call. The 17th of March, 1989, a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the warehouse outside Philadelphia finishing inventory when my secretary put my sister Janet through. She was calling from a payphone in Allentown. Dad had had a heart attack on Sunday night. She'd been at the hospital that morning when he stopped breathing. She said, "Petey, he's gone. The funeral's Friday at St. Anthony's." I said, "I'm not coming." There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "Petey, please." I said, "I'm not coming, Janet." I hung up. I finished the inventory sheet I was working on. I walked across the warehouse floor to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, waiting to feel something I could name. Nothing came. I drove home that night and told my wife, Helen. She set down the bowl she was drying and just looked at me. She didn't argue. She'd watched me carry this for 10 years already. What I did not understand, standing in that kitchen, was that I had just refused the only event that could have ever ended this. Here's the version of the story I told myself for 40 years. So you understand what I built. I was 16 when my mother died. Breast cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to grave. November of 1960. She was 41. My father was a machinist at Bethlehem Steel in Allentown, Korean War veteran. The kind of man who'd grown up in the Depression in a house where you didn't say what you felt and you didn't ask. His name was Walter. At her funeral, I stood next to him at the casket. My sister Janet, 11 years old, was crying so hard she couldn't stand. My father reached into his coat and took out a folded handkerchief. He handed it to me, and he said 3 words. "Stand up straight." That was the whole sentence. That was everything he said to me at my mother's funeral. He remarried in 1962, a widow named Lorraine. She tried. She was a kind woman. I would not let her in. I left for college on scholarship the next fall. I came home once, never again. I worked summers in Pittsburgh to make sure I didn't have to. I married Helen in 1979. My father came to the wedding. He did not dance. He did not give a toast. He stood for the photograph with his hands at his sides like he was waiting for a roll call. My son David was born in 1981. He did not come to the hospital. He mailed a check for $50 on a piece of yellow legal paper. The note said, "For the baby, Dad." That check sat in my dresser for 8 years. I never cashed it. Every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. A check, 3 or 4 words, nothing more. He provided. He did not appear. By the time he died, I had built a fortress around the boy whose father had said, "Stand up straight" at his mother's funeral. The fortress was made of one feeling, very purified. Hatred, clean as a knife. 3 people tried to tell me the truth across the decades. I would not hear any of them. My sister Janet was the first. She called me in 1983. She said, "Petey, he's not what you think he is. He keeps a Polaroid of David on his workbench. He showed it to me. He told the foreman that's his grandson." I told her she was being naive. The Polaroid was theater. I had inventory to count. I hung up. My wife Helen was the second. The summer of 1986. She came back from a phone call in the kitchen. She set down the dish towel and said, "Peter, your father called. He wanted to know if David liked the bicycle. He stayed on the line for 23 minutes. He just kept talking about the weather. I think he was trying to ask if you would come for Thanksgiving." I told her I did not need her to interpret my father for me. She did not bring it up again. She went upstairs. I stayed at the kitchen table with the newspaper in my hands, and I did not read a word of it for an hour. The third voice came 6 months after the funeral I refused to attend. A cardboard box arrived at the house from my stepmother, Lorraine. Photographs I had never seen. A short letter. The last paragraph said, "Petey, he never said it, but every Christmas card you sent, he kept in the drawer next to his razor." I did not open the box. Helen moved it 3 times during 3 different renovations. I did not open it for 34 years. 3 warnings from the only 3 people on earth who knew the full shape of it. I heard none of them, because admitting any of them would have required me to put down the knife I had been sharpening since I was 16. Stop the video, if you can, right now, and ask yourself, honestly, who are you currently not speaking to? Whose name makes your jaw tighten? Whose face you can summon in 3 seconds from a photograph 30 years old? It does not have to be a father. It can be a mother, a sibling, a child you stopped knowing how to talk to, a friend who 15 years ago did something you have not, in your heart, ever decided to put down. I am not going to tell you that what they did was acceptable. Maybe it wasn't. Mine wasn't. The man said 3 words at his wife's funeral and handed me a handkerchief instead of an arm. That is real. But I want you to ask yourself one thing. How much of your day this week has belonged to that person? That is the math nobody does, and it is the math that runs your life if you don't. I'm asking you to do it just once, just for a minute, then keep watching. Because what cracked me open wasn't a moral lesson. It was a sentence. I want to tell you about Roger Hammond. May of 2024. Delta Flight 4421, Philadelphia to Boston. I was flying up for my grandson Michael's graduation from Boston College. Helen was already there. I had stayed back for a doctor's appointment that turned out to be a waste of my time. A man boarded at the last second and sat down beside me. About my age, white hair, a wool blazer that did not match his jeans. He held a paperback he was not reading. His name was Roger Hammond, he said. Retired engineer, Pittsburgh, visiting his daughter. About 40 minutes in, I asked him how long he was staying. He said, 2 weeks. I lost my wife last October. The house is harder than I expected. I said the polite thing. He nodded. Then he said, The strange part is, ever since Francis died, I haven't been thinking about Francis. I've been thinking about my father. His father had died in 1983, a foundry accident outside Pittsburgh. The two of them had not spoken in 9 years. Roger had carried it the way men of our generation did, quietly, successfully, with a clean record at work and a marriage that lasted, and a daughter who turned out fine. He said, then my wife died, and I sat down in the empty living room one night and started crying. And the person I was crying for was not Francis. It was my father, 41 years after he was in the ground. He was watching the clouds out my window. He said, I had a friend, an older fellow, who once told me something I didn't understand until that night. And then Roger Hammond, retired engineer, complete stranger, said the sentence I will carry until I am in the ground myself. He said, hatred is the most respectable form of grief. I sat with that. The plane hummed. The man across the aisle was asleep. I said, I don't follow. And Roger said, it's the only way men of our generation were allowed to keep loving someone we never finished loving. You can't cry for them, so you hate them. The hatred is the muscle that holds the door open. It's exhausting. And the whole time, the only thing on the other side of the door is the grief you were never given permission to carry. I am not a man who weeps in public. I had not wept in public since my mother's funeral, and even then I did not weep. I stood up straight, as instructed. But on that plane, at 33,000 feet, somewhere over the Carolinas, I put my hand over my mouth, and I cried for my father for the first time since I was 16 years old. 30 minutes, without making a sound. Roger Hammond did not say anything. He put his hand on my forearm. He left it there until I stopped. Here is the rest of what Roger said, because the thesis sentence was not the catastrophe. After I had stopped crying, after I had wiped my face with a cocktail napkin, I told him about my father, the handkerchief, the funeral I did not attend, the 34 years, the check I had never cashed. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he said, Peter, can I tell you what I heard? I said yes. He said, you haven't been hating him. You've been mourning him with the only emotion that didn't require him to apologize. He let that sit. Then he said, hatred doesn't need the other person. It's the grief that owes nothing to the dead. You can carry it forever. It doesn't ask anything of you that grief does. Grief makes you look at how much you love them. Hatred lets you skip that part. I want to be honest with you about what I felt next. Fury, because I had just realized something I could not afford to know. I had given almost 40 years of my life, clean, focused, productive years, to an emotion whose entire purpose was to keep me from feeling what I had felt at 16, standing next to a man at a casket who did not know how to say to his only son, I am as lost as you are. The man had not been cold. He had been broken, and so had I. And I had spent 60 years calling his brokenness cruelty, so I would not have to share it with him. Roger said one more thing before we landed. He said, I waited 41 years to find this out. The only useful thing about being old is being able to tell someone before they get this far. We did not exchange numbers. He helped me get my bag down from the overhead bin. He shook my hand at the gate. He said, Take care, Peter. He walked toward the rental cars. I have not seen him since. I do not need to. He had already done what he was put on that plane to do. Here is the why I promised you, the real one. It was not that my father had loved me secretly all along. He may have. He almost certainly did, in the way a man like that loved, which was insufficient by any standard a son could measure with. Lorraine's letter said as much. The drawer next to his razor said as much. The Polaroid on the workbench said as much. But that is not the point of the story. The point is that for 60 years I had been refusing to mourn my mother, not my father, the girl who died when I was 16 and left me alone in a house with a man who did not know how to be alone in a house with me. The hatred I had for my father was the only place I could keep her. If I forgave him, the floor opened, and underneath the floor was a 16-year-old boy I had abandoned to the basement of myself for nearly 70 years. I taught my son David some of the same shapes in smaller doses. He is 45 years old now, the exact age I was when my father died. He calls me on Sundays. He is careful with me. He never asks me about my own childhood. He learned, somewhere along the way, that there were rooms in his father he wasn't to enter. I built that. I built the no trespass sign on the door he never walks through. The hatred ends at the funeral I did not attend, but the shape of it has continued in the things I cannot quite say to David on the phone. That is the inheritance. That is what the grudge passes down, not the original wound, the defensive posture that grew up around it. I am undoing it now, slowly, late, but I am undoing it. If you are still watching and there is a person you are not currently speaking to, or you are speaking to but have not actually seen in 20 years, here is what I want to tell you. You do not have to forgive them. That word is a problem. It sounds like you are letting them off a hook. You are not. The hook was always yours. They were never on it. They were dead, or unavailable, or 2 states away and oblivious. The hook was inside your own mouth. You have to put the hook down. That is not the same as forgiveness. That is just admitting how much the holding has cost you. If they are dead, go to the grave, even if it is 35 years late, especially if it is 35 years late. Take an hour, bring nothing, just stand there. If they are alive, and I mean this, pick up the phone. Not to confront them, not to demand anything, just to ask them a question you have never asked them. Not, why did you do that? Not, do you remember what you said? Ask them about their life. Ask them about a year you have never asked about. Ask them what their father was like. Most people of my generation will not answer the deep version of that question on the first try. They were not trained to, but they will start somewhere. They will tell you about a boss, a car, a summer, and inside that small story is the door. Don't try to fix anything in one conversation. You won't. You will just open a door, and over the next year, or 2 or 5, the person on the other side will start to walk through it in small steps, on their own schedule, in their own way. There are 6 words I should have said to my father at any moment in 50 years. I never said them. I will say them now on this video, 35 years too late. Dad, tell me about your life. I'm 82. 2 summers ago, after that plane landed, I rented a car at Logan, and I drove straight from Boston to the cemetery in Allentown before I went to my grandson's graduation. 6 hours each way. I had not been to that cemetery in 35 years. I stood at my father's headstone for 40 minutes. I did not say much out loud. I did not need to. What I did was put the box from the basement next to the headstone, the one Lorraine had sent in 1989, the one I had not opened. I sat down in the wet grass and I opened it, finally, with my back against the stone. I will tell you one thing about what was in the box, the thing I did not expect. The last thing in it was an envelope addressed to me, in my father's handwriting, unsent, dated a week before the heart attack. He had written 4 sentences. I will not read them on camera. They are mine. I will tell you only that they began with the words, "Son." I do not know how to do this. That is what hatred had cost me 35 years of access to. If you have watched this far, I am asking one thing. Don't wait until you are 82 to open the box. The box is at the back of your closet right now. You know which one. You know whose name is on it. This week, write down one question you have never asked the person you cannot speak to. You don't have to ask it yet. Just write it down. Put it on the refrigerator. Look at it for a few days. Share this video with one person who needs to hear it. They will know who they are. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me while I am still here. And in the comments, tell me whose name lives behind the hatred you have called other things. I will read every one.